It's time to do another Why Did I Watch This video about a crappy Christian movie, but I don't know which one to choose. Last month I did Mr. Kruger's Christmas, which is not a good movie, but is at least kinda sweet, and not all that heavy-handed, and chock full of wall-to-wall Jimmy Stewart. How do I follow that? Do I even want to follow that? I could just stop there. Maybe I shouldn't press my luck. Then again, maybe that's exactly what I should do. Come on, stop! There's no button down here, so what did I just hit? And why did it stop? Anyway, looks like I got Time Changer, which I think I've seen before. Unfortunately, I don't really remember much about it, so I'll have to watch it again before we can move on. Okay then, Time Changer it is. Time Changer is so bad. It's the story of Russell Carlyle, a professor at a Bible seminary in 1890 who is about to publish a book in which he argues that it's important to teach people morals. So important that it's okay to give people moral lessons without mentioning Christ. Most of his colleagues at the Bible seminary are cool with this. They're all like, hey, great book, Russell. But there's this one colleague of Carlyle's, played by the captain of the Love Boat, who's being a total dick about it. He's like, Russell, you can't teach people morals without beating them over the head with the Jesus stuff, because if you do, they can just blow off the morals, since you haven't given them any absolute standard to determine what is right and what is wrong. And Carlyle is like, yeah, well, I disagree. And Love Boat guy is like, you don't get it. If we separate moral teaching from smacking people in the face with the gospel of Jesus, it will result in a sinful and decadent future society. And Carlyle is like, how do you know? And Love Boat guy is like, because I have a time machine. And the thing is, he does! He does have a time machine! And he uses that time machine to send Carlyle into the future without his understanding or consent to show him how awful the early 21st century is and how wrong he was to ever dare to think that it was okay to teach someone morals without simultaneously crushing their skull beneath a cinder block on which the Sermon on the Mount has been inscribed. Carlyle travels into the future, or the present from the perspective of audiences at the time of the film's release, or the past from the perspective of you and me right now, but more recent than the part of the past Carlyle is from. Look, it's complicated. The point is, Carlyle travels from 1890 to sometime in the early 2000s, and he learns that Love Boat guy is right. The world sucks, and it's all because children are being taught morals without also being stabbed in the face with crucifixes by a mob of enraged Sunday school teachers screaming the Lord's Prayer. Having realized the error of his ways, Carlyle returns to his own time and revises his book. That's it. That's the protagonist's character arc. He realizes he was wrong about this one thing he thought. And the only thing that winds up different as a result of his journey into the future is that he publishes a slightly altered version of his obscure academic theological text than he would have otherwise. Doesn't that sound like a great movie? But you might be saying to yourselves, Steve, surely the movie must be about something other than that. It's over 90 minutes long. We know because of the title that accompanied the clock wipe a couple of minutes ago. There must be more to it than what you're saying. And the truth is, there is more to it, and I'm going to tell you about some of it, because I'll be damned if I'm going to just sit here alone and live with it! But none of it really matters. The dramatic arc of the film is just as I've described it. Guy wants to write a book. Guy's friend tells him he's wrong about a thing. Guy's friend sends Guy 100 years into the future. Guy sees that his friend was right, returns home from the future, revises his book accordingly. The end. Doesn't that sound like a great movie? The problems with Time Changer begin with its lead character. As written by Rich Cristiano, who also directed, and played by D. David Morin. Yes, that D. David Morin, Kevin from Empty Nest. I'm excited too, but let's focus up. What was I saying? Right, problems with the lead character. Russell Carlyle spends most of the film as a fish out of water, a 19th century man in a 21st century world. But that doesn't play as well as it should, because when we see Carlyle in his own time, he seems pretty out of step with everyone else there, too. Writer-director Cristiano seems to think the best way to write dialogue for 19th century people is to eliminate contractions and have everyone address each other with stiff formality at all times. It's a lazy, hacky technique, but some members of the cast handle it better than others. For example, it's not really a problem for the actors who portray Carlyle's colleagues at the seminary. Hal Linden, who I presume dropped in for one day to pick up a paycheck, does just fine, even managing to take his role of old guy in charge who sits at a table and create somewhat of a character. And Gavin MacLeod gives a solid performance as well, playing Carlyle's time machine-having acquaintance. You'll never appreciate the acting chops of the guy who played Captain Steubing more than when you see him sharing a scene with David Morin. For whatever reason, Morin plays Carlyle like a well-mannered but impossibly naive android. Is it a conscious performance choice that doesn't play? Is he just a shitty actor? I can't really tell. All I know is it doesn't work when Carlyle is in his own time where he supposedly belongs, and it gets way worse when he jumps 100 years into the future. Carlyle reacts to almost everything he encounters in the modern world with either wide-eyed befuddlement or hopeless confusion, even stuff that, to a man from his time, of his education, shouldn't be so unfamiliar, like electric lights, or fountains, or the practice of tipping the staff at a hotel. Speaking of the hotel, look at the expression on his face as he watches, I don't know, something on TV in his room. What could he possibly be watching in this shot? Let's see, this movie was made in 2002, so I don't know, maybe that episode of CSI where the rat crawls out of the dead woman's mouth? Also, I'm pretty sure this was my facial expression while I sat in the theater watching Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. He also seems way too shocked by things like casual profanity, or teenagers planning to party without telling their parents, or, I don't know, the existence of religious hypocrisy. It makes sense that a man like Carlyle, who is a conservative prude even by 19th century standards, would be offended by things like that, but he reacts to them like he's never heard of such things before. At the end of the film, after he returns to his own time, he actually says to his friend Loveboat Guy, "The church seems to be filled with professing Christians who do not follow the Lord they claim to believe." Are we supposed to believe churches have only developed that problem sometime in the last 100 years or so? Of course, I know what's going on here. Carlyle reacts this way to modern society because the message of the film is modern society is bad. Carlyle is aghast to hear a man say he's not only divorced, but happily so, because Rich Cristiano wants all of us to be aghast at that. Carlyle is shocked and appalled to learn that the two people kissing on TV aren't married. By the way, add acting to the list of things he's apparently never heard of, because we're supposed to be shocked and appalled at our culture's permissive attitude towards sex, represented by two fully clothed people sharing a chaste smooch in a TV show. That strain of puritanical anti-modernism is what makes Time Changer bad in the very particular way in which it is bad. It's also bad the way most bad movies are bad. The acting mostly sucks. The pacing is terrible. We spend half an hour watching Carlyle dick around worrying about whether or not Loveboat Guy is going to endorse his book before he even gets in the time machine. And the direction is in the artless, impersonal style typical of, say, a Lifetime original movie circa 1995. But its peculiar Time Changer badness is a result of its crude reactionary moralism. Russell Carlyle isn't an uptight square who goes on an unexpected adventure and realizes he needs to loosen up a little. He's an uptight square who goes on an unexpected adventure and realizes he wasn't enough of an uptight square to begin with. His character doesn't experience an arc so much as a mild incline. The lesson he learns, that 21st century society would be better if it were more like late 19th century society, is an unusual one to be presenting to a 21st century audience. It's not unusual for the particular strain of evangelical Christianity that produced this film to pander to its target audience by inviting them to join in longing for the good old days. It is a little weird that, for the purposes of this film, the good old days are when your great-grandparents were kids. Speaking of things in the movie that are a little weird but also very revealing, there's this scene between Carlisle and a Christian woman he befriends, where she launches into a sermon about how secular entertainment is a tool of Satan. I'm not paraphrasing. She literally describes secular entertainment as a tool of Satan. Not only is this alarmist moral panic horseshit, it's ultimately in the service of Cristiano's shallow and silly theological conviction that moral instruction must not be separated from Christianity, because if you teach someone right from wrong without also telling them about Jesus Christ, they won't respect the morals because the morals won't have any authority. I'd list all the philosophical and empirical reasons to reject that argument. The existence of moral behavior in pre-Christian and modern non-Christian societies, the fact that because so-and-so said so doesn't necessarily make a moral principle more compelling even if the supposed so-and-so is a god, the ease with which the moral authority and or very existence of the Christian God and any other god can be disputed. Those are just a few, but I don't think Rich Cristiano cared when he was making this movie, and I don't think he'd care now. He came up with what he thought was a clever and compelling way to use drama to justify his narrow, retrograde worldview, and because he's evidently not a very thoughtful or curious person, he was satisfied when the fruit of his labor was Time Changer. It's a shame I wasn't that satisfied when I watched it. Though that does raise the question, why did I watch Time Changer? I think I watched it to encourage myself to watch other, better, less theologically didactic time travel movies, like Time Bandits, or Time After Time, or George Pal's adaptation of The Time Machine, or maybe even some that don't have the word time in their titles. There must be one or two.